Director, IIT Madras. Technical education facilitates the acquisition of practical and applied skills as well as basic scientific knowledge, which begins with exploration of career options, support basic academic and life skills. The importance of technical education has to be encouraging self-learning and independence. As quoted by Swami Vivekananda, we want that education by which character is formed, strength of mind is increased, the intellect is expanded, and by which one can stand on one's own feet. With this quote, I welcome the resource person, Professor R. Natarajan, beloved Vice Chancellor, Dr. K.N.B. Murthy, Dean School of Engineering, Dr. A. Srinivas, Deans of various school principals of other esteemed institutions, and all the participants to this DGL. Now, I request Dr. Girisha GS, Chairperson, Computer Science and Engineering, to introduce today's resource person, Professor R. Natarajan. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, madam. I'm audible?
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon to everyone. It is a great honor for me to introduce Professor R. Natarajan. We were indeed privileged to have had such a noted personality as our resource person today. Professor R. Natarajan served as the Director of Indian Institute of Technology, Madras from 1995 to 2001, and as the Chairman of the All India Council for Technical Education, a statutory body of the Government of India from 2001 to 2004. He was the Vice President of the Indian National Academy of Engineering during 2002 to 2006, and the Chairman of the Research Council of the Central Field Research Institute, Dhanbad, during 1995 to 2005. He was a member of India-China Eminent Persons Group during 2002 to 2004. He was still recently the Chairman of BITES, Karnataka, and the Co-Chairman of the Engineering Education Forum of the Indian National Academy of Engineering. He is a Fellow of Indian National Academy of Engineering, Indian Society for Technical Education, National Academy of Social Sciences, Institution of Engineers, Indian Institute of Plant Engineers, National Foundation of Indian Engineers, Indian Institute of Materials Management, and Madras Science Foundation. He has been conferred honorary doctorate degrees by the University of South Australia, JNTU, Kanpur University, Nagarjuna University, Purvanchal University, and NIT Agartala. He has been a member of the editorial boards of Fuel Science and Technology, ASEE Journal of Engineering Education, International Journal of Engineering Education, Transformations in Engineering Education, Indian Journal of Technical Education, and Staff and Educational Development International, editor of the Journal of the Steam and Fuel Users Association of India, and the Journal of Plant Engineering. So please join me in welcoming Professor R. Natarajan to address all of us on the topic, Grand Challenges for Technical Education in India. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Kirisha. Professor K.N.B. Murthy, the very dynamic Vice Chancellor of Dayanand Sagar University, as well as the BITES Board for IT Education Standards. Mrs. Veena, Mohammed Imtiaz, and the other participants, panelists and attendees. I will see that we have a total of 21 people. Maybe a few more will join. The topic I've chosen today, and I will start sharing my screen. Yeah, is the grand challenges for technical education in India. First, I have to explain the concept of grand challenges. It is used quite popularly now, both in the United States as well as in other countries, and particularly in India, we have our own set of grand challenges. I'm trying to apply this concept to technical education, which is an extremely important sector of the Indian scenario. And let us see what we can identify as grand challenges, why we call them grand challenges, and what are some of the steps taken in order to address, say, these challenges. First, let us look at what these grand challenges are. What are grand challenges? If you look at yes, Wikipedia defines or explains grand challenges. They are more than ordinary research questions or priorities. We have research scholars and faculty members who have their research questions and priorities, but grand challenges are a little more than that. their end results or outcomes, when you solve them, are global in scale. They're very difficult to accomplish, yet offer hope of being ultimately tractable if a large number of people come together, collaborate. Then there's a hope that these challenges will be solved or these challenges will be met. They demand an extensive number of research projects across many technical and non-technical or managerial disciplines. They're accompanied by well-defined metrics. In order to address them, we require coordinated, collaborative, and collective efforts. And it must capture the popular imagination, and therefore it must seek political support. Without political support, for example, we require political support in order to provide funds in the budgets. Karnataka budget was very recently announced. And as far as education is concerned, a number of innovative changes are being proposed. For example, the concept of Karnataka Institutes of Technology on the lines of IITs and NITs. So if you have the political support, you can start addressing these challenges. About a couple of decades ago, the National Academy of Engineering of the United States, it identified 14 grand challenges. They worked for 14 months, coincidence. They had an international committee of about 50 scholars and professors and academics from 40 different countries. They worked for about 14 months, 15 months, in order to identify, recognize what are the greatest challenges and opportunities for engineering. Before that, a few studies had also been made about the greatest achievements in engineering and technology. Subsequent to that, they came to the idea of the concept of grand challenges. The NAA committee identified 14 grand challenges, which are challenges and opportunities for engineering and engineering education during the world's next few generations, 50 years or whatever. In our national education policy, its end goal coincides with 2035. They gave themselves about 15 years in order to achieve the suggestions made during this education policy. It pointed to engineering or scientific or technological research and innovation that look promising for addressing each of these challenges, as well as suggested currently unmet research needs. Follow-up actions have taken place, just like NEP has resulted in many implementation strategies. Here again, follow-up actions. Now, a couple of important follow-up actions are the universities in the United States, many of them have introduced the concept of grand challenge scholars. They provide them with resources in terms of scholarships and also facilities and labs in order for them to address parts of these challenges. No one institution can hope to solve the entire set of challenges. Also, the member academies of CATES, which is the Council of Academies of Engineering and Technological Sciences, of which the Indian National Academy of Engineering is a member. They have come up with a set of 10 challenges. What is the NAE Grand Challenges list for engineering? I will go through them carefully and slowly so that you realize that these are the major problems that confront humanity. Advanced personalized learning, which has become extremely important during the pandemic. Enhance virtual reality, engineer better medicines, restore and improve urban infrastructure, provide access to clean water, manage the nitrogen cycle, develop carbon sequestration methods, the means of reducing the carbon, prevent nuclear terror, make solar energy economical, which is an important challenge, reverse engineer the brain, advance health informatics, secure cyberspace, provide energy from fusion, and engineer the tools of scientific discovery. If you look at the 14 challenges, they cover several domains in which humanity and human beings in order for them to survive, solutions have to be found. Now, this is the pictorial view of the several challenges. I won't go through them in any detail, but the Grand challenges, you can see they cover sustainability, health, security, and joy, the pursuit of happiness, which in the Western civilization is an important meaning for life. At the bottom, it pointed out that William Perry, he chaired this committee consisting of 50 subject experts from 40 different countries. So wide participation from throughout the world and from different fields, they have resulted in these 14 grand challenges. Even today, they have not yet added any more challenges, although there have been suggestions. But lots of people are working on solutions to these challenges. The Indian National Academy, all the CATES academies have also started looking at their own set of challenges, which have particular reference to their countries. In India, we launched a program. The short form is Imprint. It was launched in 2015. It's an acronym for the different areas we are looking at. Imprint stands for Impacting Research, Innovation, and Technology. Highlighted the theme, which is an important consideration for a country of a large population like India. Yes, there are a million challenges in addition to the grand challenges that our country faces, but then we have a billion minds to try to resolve them, to solve them, provide approaches to solutions of these challenges. So there is a possibility that we might be able to address these challenges in a positive manner. Now, Imprint identified 10 technology domains, whereas NAE identified 14 different areas, and 5 each from the living world and 5 from the materials world. Now, these are the 10 technology domains. Living world, healthcare technology, sustainable habitat, energy security, water and river systems, environment and climate change. These are refer to the living world. In the materials world, the areas are manufacturing technology, defense and security, nanoscience and technology, advanced materials, and computer science and ICT, information and communication technology. IIT Kanpur at the moment is the national coordinator, and a large number of institutions and individuals are involved in finding solutions to these challenges. Now, I'm looking at technical education. We are all educators, students, faculty members, administrators, and so on. If you take a look at technical education, can we identify grand challenges? So you need to look at the several national education policies since independence. The latest one is the NEP 2020. The IIT Review Committee reports. Originally, these review committees looked at individual IITs, but about 15 years ago, all the IITs were looked together in a comprehensive fashion, and there is only one IIT Review Committee. If possible, you should Google and find out what they have been saying. P. Ramarao was the chairman of one of the committees, and they have come up with very important considerations. So successive IIT Review Committee reports, they give a lot of information about what has been done, what needs to be done, and what approaches are being taken by these institutions of national importance. During the previous regime, political regime, we had the National Knowledge Commission headed by Sam Pitroda. It was a very interesting exercise, and a large number of suggestions again have been made. And if you look at the documents, you will see that the recommendations are indeed very substantive. And of course, we have the National Education Policy and several other committees. AICTE has set up several task forces, and their reports are available. And we have had a whole host of conferences on technical education in the country, hundreds of them. And their proceedings are also worth looking at. And so if you look at all of them, they seem to come out a set of grand challenges. I have looked at them and I've classified them into 11 groups. Let us look at them in detail. The first one is the national perspective. To enhance the GER, the gross enrollment ratio, it depends upon the sector you're looking at, but in part of particular relevance to us is higher and professional education. So currently it is supposed to be between 12 to 24%. I've given a wide margin there because different studies and different sectors, different numbers are indicated. But anyway, NEP suggests that by 2035, in another 15 years, it should increase to 50%. In the developed economies, particularly the Western economies, it is of the order of 80% to 85%. So ours is very low. That means to say the population which is to be in higher and professional education of the total number, only about 12 to 24% are actually pursuing higher and professional education. We want to increase it by 50%, which will have several benefits. I will look at this GER, the next slide, in some detail. But as of now, let us look at the second one. It is strategic planning. Strategic planning is long-term planning. And it says that every institution should define its vision, mission, strategic plan, roadmap, key result areas, and quality policy. It applies to undergraduate institutions, postgraduate institutions, deemed universities, private universities, and all of them. So it gives a direction for development to take place. It is extremely important. You need to know what your end goal is. Now let me look at the GER in some detail. As they say, the devil is in the details. Now, if you want to enhance GER as the planner, then you have to provide resources. And how do you provide resources? Through allocating a certain percentage of GDP. Several national policies over the years, the figure 6% is mentioned in all of them. That means to say, defense, you provide so much, but for education, you please reserve at least 6%. Now, what does that mean? That is an overall number. So this budgetary allocation depends upon the sector that you're talking about. Either the school sector, secondary school sector, primary school sector, higher education, vocational education. So there is a sector-wise distribution. Please remember that. If a certain amount is allocated, it has to be distributed among these different sectors. What are the contributions of the state government and of the central government? The consequent requirements are of teachers, infrastructure, resources, public versus private sector contributions, enabling and constraining policies, quality and excellence issues, benchmarking, essentially meaning you look at another institution which is doing better than you are and try to replicate what they have done. That is benchmarking. Global versus national rankings and implications. Almost everybody is aware of the importance of rankings now. In India, the magazines do it, newspapers do it. There is an NIRF. And globally, you have several of them, Times Higher Education, Quacquarelli-Simons, and several others. And every time the ranking list is announced, we get into a kind of a panic because Indian institutions are not doing well at the moment. Quantity versus quality. Yes, you have increased the quantity by increasing the number of institutions, students, and so on, to enhance GER. But what about the quality? Jobs for all? Is employment a consideration? Please also remember that while you specify a percentage, 6%, for example, the amounts will be different because GDP increases with time. Purchase power parity varies with time. Therefore, when you just say percentage-wise, that is not the whole story. You have to look at the individual amounts. The Karnataka budget has been announced. So people had been expecting and demanding enhanced allocation for education in view of the challenges of NEP. At the moment, there is no explicit allocation, but you definitely have to enhance the allocation in order to achieve the higher GER. Therefore, the GER, it implies and includes a whole lot of things. I've tried to address them. Continuing on with the grand challenges, the third one I have looked at is the institutional culture and effectiveness. Every institution has a certain ambience in which education and research and innovation goes on. So to promote innovation and entrepreneurship among faculty and students, to promote inter and multidisciplinary teaching and research activities in every institution, the NEP talks about these two, inter and multidisciplinary. In fact, I want every institution to be interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary, although it is not a new institution that you are building. In the existing institution, you strengthen, reinforce these inter and multidisciplinary activities. Every institution to have a culture and ambience of scholarship, quality, excellence, and high morale. You must have all these things within the institution in order for things to do well, in order for the institution to do well. And also, this is an important thing that at least in some institutions it has been identified. It is very common in institutions in the West, a peer review mechanism for assessing the effectiveness and efficiency of academic processes. You have accreditation processes, but individually the institution should look at each of the departments, for instance, and bring in the topmost experts in that field in order to look at how well things are happening, and if not, what corrective action has to be taken, what activities have to be reinforced, and so on. When I was an IIT Madras, we started this peer review mechanism, brought in people from abroad, brought in people from the best institutions in the country, and also from industry and government, in order for them to spend 3 days talking to the different stakeholders, looking at all the facilities, and then coming up with a set of recommendations. The next challenge I look at is leadership development. In every institution, the head of the institution, for example, has a specific tenure. And at the end of that tenure, and he gives place to his successor. But do we have a succession plan? Do we look at who will be coming next? Is there a period of overlap between the current head of the institution and the next one? The Indian Institute of Science does this extremely well. The new director is appointed about 3 or 4 months before the term of the current director expires. And the two of them work together for about 3 to 4 months. And you can see the benefits of such an overlap. And once a leader has been identified, then there must be leadership development programs. When I was chairman of AICTE, the RECs were just being converted into NITs. So there was a whole new set of directors who had been appointed. But unless they knew what the job was, including administrative, including academic, including financial leadership, for example, the institute will not have a smooth journey. So these leadership development programs are also important. And QIP, for example, had been providing this kind of facility for institutional leaders. Next is the crux of the higher education system. And these are teaching, learning systems and processes. All faculty members not only must have domain knowledge, but also they must possess pedagogic and communication skills, and as well as the ability to employ technology-enhanced learning, teaching, assessment systems and processes. This is the first time I'm bringing this in, but I will stress this in a couple more slides. What happens in an educational institution? Learning, which is really the ultimate objective, and it is helped by teaching, and then assessment is an important component of the overall process. So learning is more important than teaching. You may teach well, but the ultimate question is, have the students learned? So learning, I put first learning, teaching, and without assessment, you do not know how well you have done the process, systems and processes. And the another point I make is that the LTA processes must be interactive, feedback intensive, catering to diverse learners, and fulfilling the objectives of Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive competencies. Nowadays, all engineering institutions know about Bloom's taxonomy. It is involved in defining your learning outputs and learning outcomes. And even, for example, assessment processes must take into consideration the several levels of Bloom's taxonomy, and it must assess the individual on each one of those aspects. Research is these days very important in assessing the ranking or accreditation of the institution. Research is at least as important as teaching. So What are the challenges? To double the PhD output in engineering in 5 years. The number of PhDs in engineering is less in general than the PhDs in science, for instance. And the typical challenge here is to double it. At the moment, for example, even though it is demanded that every professor and associate and assistant professor must have a PhD, it is only in the IITs and more recently in the NITs, even when you recruit them, you demand that they have a PhD. With many of the other institutions, you do not have enough PhDs available for taking as your professors, and therefore you give them an opportunity after they enter the institution to register for PhD and complete it in a certain amount of time. So therefore, the objective ultimately is if you double the number of PhDs in 5 years, then there is a chance that most of the faculty members will have a PhD. To ensure that all faculty members in higher and professional education institutions must have PhD qualifications. Excuse me. And you must demand that all faculty members should be actively engaged in research, development, and innovation, in addition to teaching responsibilities. Teaching is, of course, very important because the student is an important stakeholder. But in addition, in order for the faculty members to stay ahead of the emerging trends, they need to engage in R&D and I. Now here, I look at the anatomy of a research university. You are a research university, and according to NIP, most of the institutions should be of this type, the research intensive university. So what does it consist of? So what are the processes which take place in a research university? The central block there, learning again, I put ahead of teaching, assessment, processes. In addition, we need R&D. IC&SR is an IIT Madras acronym. Industrial consultancy and sponsored research. Some other IITs, they put SR first and IC, scientific research and industrial consulting. In any case, both consultancy and sponsored research and continuing education, lifelong education. In order for these activities to take place, you need inputs. Without input, nothing will happen. You won't have any outputs. You can classify these inputs into 3 types. One is human resources consisting of faculty, staff, and students. Physical resources consisting of labs, library, computer infrastructure, and other infrastructure. And for all these to work, in order to appoint good faculty members, in order to have good labs, you need vitamin M. This is the financial resources. So many people would have told you, tried to tell you that money is not important. Money is absolutely important. Without financial resources, you cannot have the other types of resources and activities. So we have looked at what takes place in a typical university, research university. Then what comes out of a research university? You can identify or recognize 2 types of outputs. The one in the top block, these are tangible and they're called outputs. The one at the bottom, they are intangible and they are called outcomes. So what is the difference between tangible output and intangible outcome? Tangible outputs are countable. You can put some numbers on it and then you can come up with some metrics. For example, manpower, how many PhDs, how many MTechs, and so on. Research papers, both quantity and quality. Products and processes through industrial consultancy, sponsored research, patents, books. So there's a whole lot of things. These are countable and you can put a number on each one of them and therefore they are tangible and they are outputs. Then at the bottom square or rectangle, you have intangible, which are qualitative in nature and they are called outcomes. For example, the brand equity, scholarship identified or associated with that institution, reputation, perception is one of them. Credibility, when you look at that institution, how does it attract students, for instance? They would join an institution which has the credibility, it has a national image, it excites pride in your heart. The excellence and quality that it again evokes, and what type of a role model people, other institutions consider them to be. So these 2 blocks on the right-hand side, they are the result of all the activities and the resources that you provide. This is the anatomy of a typical research university. Now let me go to the next challenge, quality focus. To ensure that all higher and professional education institutions have up-to-date accreditation by both NAC and NBA in engineering and technology, to ensure high academic quality. Today in the Deccan Herald, there's an interesting article about the gradations in NAC and NBA. The National Education Policy says that we should have a binary result of this accreditation, accredited or not accredited. As you know, NAC has several levels, A, B, C, and even in A, there is an A plus and A plus plus. Even though the education policy says there should be binary accreditation, because that is the standard or the norm in international ranking, international accreditation, my belief is that it is not necessary that we should copy what the international accreditation agencies do. To suit our convenience, we may have different gradations. For example, even our NIRF, for instance, it has a different set of parameters compared to the international rankings. So we are not discarding the NIRF. We consider that NIRF is much more suitable for our type of institutions. At the same time, you should also compete in global rankings. The next challenge is faculty and staff focus. Every institution to organize faculty development and staff training programs to keep them functioning at the most up-to-date level. It's challenge number 8. Challenge number 9, student focus. Students are the most important stakeholders in any of these educational institutions. Even the courts have said that in judgments, for instance. So the challenge here is to equip all graduates with employability and workplace skills, to inculcate professional ethics and social responsibility in all faculty and students. This the NEP also stresses. To make teaching an attractive career option for young graduates, it is difficult to get enough good quality graduates to enter the teaching profession because they find that the other professions are much more remunerative, much more attractive, but must also make teaching an attractive career option. And then there is the alumni focus. The students who leave the portals of your institution with degrees, they are your alumni. You should engage with the alumni continuously for eliciting feedback. They have actually gone through the processes and therefore they can tell you what worked and what did not work and how to improve systems and processes where necessary. Also, they can provide resource inputs. Money, particularly, for instance, the IITs have been receiving large donations for specific requirements over the past 30, 40 years. And this is in addition to what the government grants are. So you require the alumni to provide these additional resources. And then in return, the institution must, again, recognize the best alumni, not in terms of donations, but in terms of their achievements after they left your portals. And of course, you confer on them distinguished alumni awards. This also must be a part of your agenda. The last one I look at is in terms of industry being one of the most important stakeholders who employ the graduates that we produce, you must have constant interaction between and collaboration between industry and academia. This many institutions have recognized. You need industry not only to employ your graduates, but also to provide you with technology development means, R&D expenditure, and so on. Normally, what happens is this industry-institute collaboration is an activity which is a supplementary or subsidiary activity, but you must provide for mainstream importance for both partners, industry-institute collaboration. It should be as important as, for example, teaching and research. To ensure reasonable congruence of academic preparation and offerings with overall industry requirements. Since the main employer for our graduates is industry, we must find out what the requirements are, and these change. These are dynamic requirements, and therefore our academic preparation must also be dynamic. This is again being done well by good institutions, but it is not in general something that happens. But my stress that you consider this collaboration to be a mainstream activity. And every institution to engage in sponsored R&D, sponsored by, for example, our strategic sectors like defense and atomic energy and aerospace and so on, and consultancy. And there are two types of consultancy. One is the industrial consultancy and the other one is the educational consultancy. Those institutions which are benchmark institutions, you can look at them and try to find out what you can do that the others are doing. So these in general are 11 challenges that I have identified. There may be more, some of them may be modified, but in any case, to me, these are 11 important sectors, just like the grand challenges of technology and science. There is another important point here, which I believe we must all take into consideration. The former president of ABET, she said, engineering students are very good in the process of the way we educate them in taking an exam by themselves. So you make them sit at a table, you even invigilate, try to find out that they don't consult the neighbor. So you examine them on the basis of this taking an examination individually in an examination hall. But in industry, engineering is a team endeavor. You form teams in order to identify and solve problems. And once the problem is solved, you disband the team and form a new ones. Therefore, working in a team environment is extremely important. Nowadays, again, this is stressed in good institutions. You have a capstone project or even smaller project, minor projects in other areas, and you put together a team in order to solve the problem. Now, the next set of 10 slides or so is the dire need for transformations in Indian engineering education. So I'm looking at the systemic point of view after having identified the major challenges. So transforming, right? So there are the synonyms for transforming, re-engineering and so on. So what is it that we are planning to do? We're calling for change. Change from the present, and it has some lacunae, it has some areas of improvement. So you want to go to a better future. That is the meaning of change, and that is transformation. A couple of lessons which is also applicable to the implementation of the national education policy. When you make changes, institutional leaders know you have to examine the benefits of change. You want your faculty members to change, our students to change, for example, you have to show to them that if you change, you will get the following benefits. And unless I am shown these benefits, I will not have the heart to change. And the next point is, are they implementable? How do I go for implementation? So NEP, this is the real question. So implementation of changes requires effective leadership, the director, the chairman, and so on, and the participation and commitment of all the relevant stakeholders, the followers. If you look at the current higher education, there are buzzwords, many of them. Here I've looked at 4 A's and the 4 E's. 4 A's on the left-hand side and the 4 E's on the right-hand side. You can take any alphabet and you can even add to these lists. These are buzzwords. What does that mean? That means everybody talks about it, so you have to do something about each one of them. I was a convener for a workshop about 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. We looked at the agenda for reforms in engineering education. Now, why do you want change? Rationale for introducing reforms is a good reason. There have been significant changes in the practice of engineering as a profession in the new millennium. For example, constraints imposed by environmental considerations, customization demanded by diverse customers, opportunities offered by technology development in several sectors, availability of sophisticated diagnostic and computational tools. I work in the areas of sprays and droplets. You look at a spray as a collection of drops of different sizes. About 25 years ago, there used to be projects in order to build these tools, but now these tools, particularly optical ones, are laser diagnostic. They are available off the shelf, And therefore, a lot of the trouble that you had building these instruments is gone now. It's a question of operation and utilization, use of these tools. So it has changed the practice of engineering. And wide choice of materials, great developments in the different types of materials. There have also been substantial changes in the different elements of the engineering education system. You looked at that anatomy of a research university, you had inputs, you had the system and process, and then you had the outputs and outcomes. So if you look at these different components, there have been major changes. The quality and quantity of several inputs to the system, what you get from schools, for instance, today, and the skills that they have, the digital skills that they have, is much more than what we used to leave, enter the institutions, into the engineering institution about 30, 40 years ago. The nature and scope of the outputs and outcomes from the system have also changed, what is required. The environment, the ambience in which the learning, teaching, assessment take place, that has changed. And then you have globalization now, in which innovation is identified to be the basis of competitiveness. Do you know that we now are talking about deglobalization because we have looked at the bad effects of globalization in some things. Now, I will not go into the details of this, it will take too much time. But then what I have done here in the next couple of tables is the following. Between the 20th and the 21st century, there have been many changes in characteristics. Now, this is a management perspective. I'll just look at one, the topmost difference. 20th century, the focus was on stability and predictability. In 21st century, it is the discontinuous and disruptive change and changes which take place that needs attention. So if you go through this list carefully, then you will realize the major differences. And similarly, the educational requirement of what we call now the knowledge economy, the past requirements versus the future requirements. A couple of examples here. The teacher-centric was the past requirement. Learner-centric is the future requirement, current requirement, and the future requirement. Graduates, that was the past requirement, but now lifelong learning. What you learned in your undergraduate course is not enough. You need to continue to learn because things are changing, new knowledge is being generated and acquired. Now, similarly, if you look at the sector of educational planning and administration, 20th century conformity, compliance, of course, some of these also, they move over into the 21st century. You cannot do away with conformity and compliance, but the focus was on conformity, uniformity, standardization, and so on. In 21st century, there's a whole lot of things that have included. Market forces were very important now. User-oriented research is very important. Autonomy is important. Employability is important. The NEP again looks at autonomy as a very important goal, although whether it will happen and when is a question mark. I don't believe that we are ready to offer and accept autonomy in our institutions. One other point I captured from literature, we also live at a time when many of our heroes like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Richard Branson, Larry Ellison, Mark Zuckerberg, to mention a few, they're all university dropouts. What does that mean? It means that they did not find what education the universities give as useful for them in life. Learning by doing was more important, therefore they got out of the university system. Also, there are at the moment institutions like Stanford, MIT, and our own IITs, which offer world-class educational content almost for free. These are through Coursera and the NPTEL and so on. The certificate programs are offered by these institutions, and many people consider, particularly the industry users, industry and business users, they probably find that the certificate programs are much more useful than the graduate degrees that the students get. So I'm trying to offer a paradigm, new paradigm for engineering education. Essential idea is that the new millennium paradigm incorporates the integration of several features which existed as separate entities till now. For example, initial education plus continuing education or lifelong education, institutional component plus industry component, so on and so forth. So there's a whole lot of things. So what we used to give something as standalone is not sufficient. You have to supplement it, follow it up with an additional component. So these are some detail: education plus training, quantitative expansion plus quality assurance, and so on. If you wanted to give in a sentence what the new millennium engineering education is, the current and the future engineering education is, it is multidisciplinary, it is multi-mode, the hybrid mode, online plus classroom, it is multimedia and multiple partner enterprise. So this combines several things and says that we need the integration of several components, several features in order to make our graduates, the modern day graduates, with multiple skills and knowledge. Here is the last but one slide. You ask any institution, whether you go for accreditation or any other meeting or whatever, what do you want to be? We want to be a world-class institution. In fact, I've received a New Year card from an institution which they put world-class in large letters, but then at the bottom, it's not the characteristics of world-class, but it is some important feature of that institution. So everybody wants to have this world-class institution. But the fact of the matter is, you look at the left, there is the current status now. You have several resources with you, several talents of the people that you employ, and so on. So from there to go to the world-class, you have to go through stages. Here, at least symbolically, I have shown 2 stages. You cannot avoid these stages. First, you have to focus on how to make the maximum use of the potential that you have, the existing resources and talents. Then you try to become the nation's best. For example, NIRF will give you a metric. And then from there, you work towards becoming world-class. You cannot jump from current status to world-class. You must remember that. And it is extremely hard work to go through these stages. And the really last slide is the following. So what do we look ahead for? The destination is clear. It may not be attainable in the shortest period of time, but then we want to become globally competitive and academically reputed systems and processes. Other people, the whole public, your stakeholders, they should look at your institution as a reputed and a system with having reputed processes, and they should perceive you as a great institution, academically reputed institution. How do we get there? There is a roadmap, several national policies, international considerations, and benchmarking with world-class universities. You try to find out what they are doing and how well they are doing and how I can reach that standard. And however, the road is strewn with many impediments and obstacles. Examples are lack of commitment by individuals and by groups of people, delays, policy paralysis, complacency, and many other usual suspects. Complacency is something that I notice in many of the institutions. If you ask the faculty members who are really the prime movers of change, they are satisfied with what they have. They're not aspired to do better than what they are doing today. You ask a faculty member, what is your immediate goal, long-term goal? I don't have a PhD now, I want to get a PhD. Why do you want to get a PhD? Well, obvious, you want to get a promotion and you want to get more remuneration and so on. But then what? After that, what? You ask this question and you realize you get some very interesting answers. Now, this is an age of rapid change. Things are moving so fast in all directions. Therefore, in order to keep up, speed is of essence. Therefore, we must start acting now. No question of procrastination, waiting for tomorrow to come and for things to happen. You have to start working from now on. Our Prime Minister made an important statement some time ago, and he said 3 things are important, 3 S's: speed, scale. However, it is a very large country with a large number of people. Therefore, no point in making a change, great change in a small sector, in a small institution or in a small part of the country. The entire country has to be enveloped with change. And in order to do this, you need skill. Therefore, 3 S's: speed, scale, and skill. Because there are many other cliches for doing this. So what have I tried to do over the past 45 minutes or so? I've tried to put a finger on the biggest challenges, the so-called grand challenges, which stare the higher education sector in the face. Once you have identified them, of course, you can try to do things in order to improve each one of them, and therefore of the entire system. I've also tried to give you a glimpse of what the future holds. The difference between the last millennium, it's a convenient signpost with which to look at things. So over the past and over the present and the future, what needs to be done? And then I have given you also some obstacles, and therefore these obstacles have to be surmounted. There is hope. There's a large number of people. There may be a million problems. We have a billion people in order to look at these problems, and many good things have happened. We must be optimistic about the future, and things can happen. Forget about the wars and things like that now. At the moment, we are in the midst of our own challenges, which we have to face and overcome. So I hope I've given you an idea about some of these things. And I have given my email ID also in the beginning. So if you want to write to me, I'll be happy to respond. Thank you, Murthy. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Veena madam, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your rich exposure and wisdom in educating us for attending to challenges in the field of technical education. Coordinated, collaborative, and collective efforts are actually the requirements, as you rightly pointed out. Getting some understanding of how we should be headed towards, we'll now take some of the questions from the audience. The first one being how multiple entry and exit help in undergraduate technical course, and how does it ensure back to academic to continue the students' education? Basically, it's about multiple entry and exit programs. So.
I wish you would not summarize what I have tried to say. Not only is it not necessary, but obviously you cannot be as accurate as, in my opinion, what I have to do. Don't relate it to your own understanding of what I have said. Forget about it. If there are any questions, we'll be happy to handle it. Summarizing somebody's lecture is not a good idea.
Right. I had just spoken out one of the questions, sir, as asked by the audience about multiple entry and exit programs.
I didn't talk about multiple entry, multiple exit. I didn't talk about it.
Right. So, okay. Apart from that, there's one question that to what extent the course-related experiments and practicals be extended to match the requirements of making industry-relevant engineers?
What is the question again?
So the need here of this day is to make industry-relevant engineers, to make them employable. Now to give them or to make them aware of the field-related work pertaining to the domain that they are doing engineering in, to what extent the course-related course and the related practicals can be extended to match this requirement is one query.
What you're trying to do is to train, educate and train our students to fulfill the requirements of industry and business. Now, these requirements only they can tell you. So you must have constant interaction with them. There are general principles available everywhere. But if you want to target a particular sector, the automobile engineering, or electric vehicles, or digital technologies, or AI and ML, get from the industry experts what the requirements is. What do they want the entry-level workers to have? What knowledge and skills? And therefore, you provide them not in an academic sense. Like, for example, Infosys has their own programs, which is simultaneous with in knowledge that you give in your institution. And these are special courses they have tailored in order to give to the students additional requirements which industry needs. Infosys does a great job of that, and many other industries also. Wipro, for instance. Therefore, you get this information from them and then train your students. But I think that it should be co-curricular. You cannot introduce it into the curriculum, but you provide it as a supplementary training.
Right. Thank you. So one more question we have relating to the core engineering branches. Now, the core engineering branches like electrical, mechanical, these seem to be at a threat in the current scenario. And so to keep them, to avoid that is moving, should we be moving only the focus towards the industry 4.0? Should that be just a requirement, or what is the solution out of this threat?
Core industry separate from IT and ITES, that is the general classification that people normally give. Now the question is, in which sector are more jobs available, where employment is more prevalent? Till now, it had been IT and ITES, and even mechanical and civil. Civil was an area where jobs were not available, but now because of, for example, construction industry doing well, because of environmental concerns and so on, there are jobs available in civil. I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm quite disappointed that streams of mechanical engineering are closing down in institutions, essentially because there are not many jobs in mechanical engineering. But this is a dynamic process. It changes continuously. So you cannot really train students to suit a particular sector. You have to give them a wide range of possibilities. Of course, you have the normal branches, civil, mechanical, and so on. It's an institutional issue where the admissions to your different departments, it changes continuously, and you need to close some branches and open new branches. For example, AICT has given a set of emerging areas of engineering. So they are encouraging you to start programs in these and close down, for example, branches in which there is no admission. So this is a continuously changing process, and one has to be quite careful.
Thank you, sir. Is there any more questions from the audience? They can speak up or post them in the chat window. We can be sending our questions to sir even later over email.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So I request now Professor Kiran Maladi to propose a vote of thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. It's my proud privilege to propose the vote of thanks on this occasion of DGL. On behalf of the Anand Sagar institutions and the entire fraternity of the university, I extend my gratitude to our honorable chief guest, Professor R. Natarajan, and also to the Bytes to take out time from his busy schedule and delivering a session on grand challenges for technical education in India. It's a great privilege to listen from such an eminent speaker with vast experience in the field of education. So with so many challenges, door open for opportunities, right? That is also true. After listening to this expert talk, we now got some good directions to work towards the same. So this definitely will help us to work towards implementation of NEP also. So thank you for inspiring and encouraging us with your words on this special day, sir. A special thanks to our Vice Chancellor, Professor KNB Murthy, Chairman Bytes, for guiding and supporting us to make the webinar successful. Also, I thank the board members and the invitees, Bytes. I extend my gratitude to Mr. A. Srinivas, Dean School of Engineering, DSU, for his constant support and cooperation. Also, I must thank the organizing team, chairpersons of all the departments, all the faculties of DSI and other institutions who have joined this webinar, and also my beloved students for joining the session and making this DGL a grand success. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Professor Murthy. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.